She cheated on me with my best friend and walked out of our marriage without ever knowing I was quietly pulling in $500,000 a year. I can still picture the exact second Stacy decided to throw everything we had away. She was perched at the kitchen table, thumbing through her phone like she didn't have a single worry to her name. I had just gotten home from work, ready to kick off my shoes and decompress, when she glanced up and said, real casual, "Neil, I want a divorce." No warning, no gentle lead-in, just a cold, flat statement like she was commenting on the weather. I stood there for a beat, wondering if I'd heard her right. "Come again?" I asked, my voice steady even though my insides were starting to twist. "I said, I want a divorce," she repeated, slower this time, like she thought I was too thick to catch on the first go-round. You'd think I would have blown up, or maybe broken down right there. But instead, what hit me hardest was just how bold she was being. Divorce? After everything we'd built together? And when I heard her reason, it only got worse. "I can't live like this anymore," she said, folding her arms like a prosecutor laying out a case. "I need a partner who actually works, who contributes. This isn't the life I signed up for." I stared at her, blinking in disbelief. "Doesn't work?" I almost laughed out loud, but somehow kept a straight face. I'd spent years grinding, climbing my way up the ladder, building a six-figure career that had set us up for a future most people could only dream about. But Stacy? She never asked about my job, never cared enough to find out how I earned my living. I guess in her mind, I was just some underachiever scraping by. Leaning back against the counter, I watched her carefully. She looked so sure of herself, so convinced she was doing the right thing. "All right," I said, setting my bag down gently. She cocked her head, thrown off. "All right?" she repeated, like she hadn't expected me to roll over that easily. "Yeah, Stacy. If you want a divorce, I'm not gonna stand in your way." For the briefest moment, I saw doubt flicker across her face, but she quickly masked it with that smug, practiced grin I knew all too well. "Good," she said, "because I already talked to a lawyer." She barely hesitated before adding, "You'll need to move out by the end of the month." Move out? Out of my house? The sheer nerve of her would have been funny if it hadn't been so pathetic. But I didn't argue. If she wanted me gone, fine. "For now," I said, keeping my voice even as I turned and headed upstairs. I could feel her watching me, probably waiting for me to lose it, to beg her to reconsider. I gave her nothing. Upstairs, I sat down on the edge of our bed, letting it all sink in. This wasn't just about her wanting a divorce. It was about control. Stacy wanted to flip the script, make me out to be the problem, the dead weight, and maybe get me to grovel at her feet for another chance. But she didn't know me as well as she thought she did. The days that followed were like a masterclass in passive-aggressive warfare. Suddenly, everything I did was wrong in her eyes, the way I folded the laundry, the way I spent my evenings, even how I brewed my damn coffee. It was clear she was trying to justify her decision by painting me as some unbearable burden. And then there was William, the guy who was supposed to be my best friend. At first, I didn't think much of it when she kept dropping his name. "William said this," or "William suggested that." But before long, it was obvious. He wasn't just a friend to her anymore. Still, I didn't confront her. I wasn't about to tip my hand. I let her think she was pulling the strings, that I was too clueless to notice the betrayal happening right under my nose. One night, as I was packing a small suitcase with a few basics, Stacy leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, that smug little smirk plastered across her face. "So, have you figured out where you're gonna stay?" she asked, her voice sweetly mocking. I zipped up the bag and turned to face her. "Don't worry about me, Stacy," I said coolly. "I'll be just fine." She scoffed, clearly irritated that I wasn't falling apart. "Good," she said, "because William and I are hosting a dinner party here next weekend. It'd be awkward if you were still lurking around." "A dinner party? In my house? With my best friend?" Her audacity was almost something to admire. "Don't worry," I said, slinging the bag over my shoulder. "I'll be long gone before then." As I walked past her, I caught the flash of triumph on her face. She thought she'd won. She thought I was just another sad, broken man crawling away in defeat. But what Stacy didn't realize was that she had just handed me the match that was going to light this whole thing on fire. If she wanted to burn it all down, I wasn't going to stop her. I'd just make sure she and William got caught in the blaze. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't loud. It's quiet. It's sitting back and letting people destroy themselves. And believe me, I was just getting warmed up. Betrayal's a sneaky thing. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks and neon signs. No, it creeps in slowly, hiding in the small moments, a casual comment here, a suspicious glance there, until one day you wake up and realize everything you trusted has been hollowed out. Stacy asking for a divorce was just the first crack. After that, everything started to crumble. Every lie, every betrayal, it all came to light, one piece at a time. And right at the center of it all was William, my so-called best friend, the guy I trusted like a brother. Looking back now, I probably should have seen the signs a lot sooner. But hindsight's a cruel teacher. At first, it was little things. Stacy would casually drop his name into conversations, telling me how William suggested this or William thought we should try that, like he was some guru we needed to follow. I'd just nod along, not thinking much of it at first. After all, William had been a close friend to both of us for years. But as the weeks passed, his name started creeping into our conversations more often, and every time she said it, there was this little warmth in her voice that twisted my gut in ways I couldn't ignore. The first real slap in the face came one Saturday afternoon. Stacy had just gotten home from one of her so-called friendly lunches with William. She was laughing, cheeks flushed, eyes bright, looking happier than I'd seen her in a long, long time. When I asked her what was so funny, she just waved me off with a little laugh and said, "Oh, it's just something William said. You wouldn't get it." I wouldn't get it. Since when had I become the outsider in my own marriage? If I was honest with myself, the cracks had started way earlier than I ever wanted to admit. After that, it got harder to ignore. I'd catch her texting with this secretive little smile on her face, locking her phone the second I glanced over. She started dressing up a little more when she had plans, but only when those plans happened to include William. Whenever I questioned it, she'd toss out the same tired excuse, they were just friends, and I was overthinking things. Overthinking. That's the favorite defense of every guilty person trying to gaslight you into questioning your own instincts. Even then, I held back. What was the point of confronting her? She would have just flipped it, made me out to be the insecure, jealous husband who couldn't handle his wife having guy friends. So, I stayed quiet, let her think I was oblivious, too busy living my life to notice her tearing ours apart. The real gut punch came not long after. I was in the middle of stuffing my life into a few battered suitcases, just like Stacy had so kindly suggested, when the doorbell rang. When I opened it, there he was, William, standing on my front porch with that same smug grin he'd worn 1,000 times before. Without even waiting for an invitation, he waltzed right in like he owned the place. "Neil, my man," he said, clapping me on the shoulder like we were still best buds. "How's it going?" I stared at him, every ounce of patience in me stretched thin. "What do you want, William?" I asked, keeping my voice calm even though my hands itched to do otherwise. He leaned back against the wall, acting casual, like he hadn't just helped himself to my whole damn life. "Just checking in," he said with a smirk. "Stacy mentioned you were moving out. Thought I'd swing by, see if you needed a hand." A hand. From the guy who was practically moving in to take my place. The nerve was almost impressive. "I've got it covered," I said sharply, turning my back on him and going back to packing. But William didn't leave. When I glanced over my shoulder, he was still there, watching me, that little calculating look in his eyes. He wasn't here to help, he was here to rub it in, to stake his claim. "Look," he said, shifting his tone like he was trying to sound sincere. "I know this must be rough, man. But, you know how life is. Things happen, I repeated slowly, turning to face him head-on. I took a step forward, closing the space between us, forcing him to look me dead in the eyes. "Yeah," William said, his voice faltering for the first time. "Life's unpredictable." "Yeah, William," I said quietly. "It is. And sometimes, those things, they come back to bite you." For the first time, the smirk slipped off his face. He looked uncertain, just for a second, and it was beautiful. I didn't give him the satisfaction of dragging it out. I turned back to my suitcase, ignoring him completely. "You've always been a cool guy, Neil," he said awkwardly, backing toward the door. "No hard feelings, right?" I stayed silent. Sometimes silence cuts deeper than any words ever could. Without another word, he let himself out. I watched from the window as he drove off, only then realizing I'd been holding my breath. That night, lying alone in the bed I'd soon be giving up, I let it all play back in my mind, every ignored sign, every lie, every betrayal. Sure, I could have confronted them, thrown accusations around, demanded answers. But honestly, what would that have changed? They'd already made me irrelevant. They'd already rewritten our story without me. What they didn't know was that I wasn't the naive, oblivious husband they thought I was. I'd been watching. I'd been planning. I was laying the groundwork for what came next. If Stacy and William thought they were about to ride off into some happily ever after sunset, they were about to get a rude awakening. Because betrayal, it doesn't stop when you get caught. That's when it really starts. And me? I was more than ready to play the long game. Divorce. Such a tiny word for something so messy and complicated. It sounds so clean, so final, but stepping into that courtroom made it clear this wasn't the end. Not by a long shot. For Stacy, it felt like a victory parade. She walked in wearing this perfectly tailored dress, her hair done up like she was heading to a gala instead of court. That same smug, victorious smile plastered on her face, it made my stomach turn. And just outside the courtroom doors, like some loyal little puppy, was William. He didn't have the guts to come inside, but his very presence said it all. Stacy wasn't just ending our marriage, she was flaunting her betrayal like it was some trophy she'd won. "Neil, let's not drag this out," she said when we sat across from each other at the negotiation table. Her voice was all smooth and fake sweet. "I don't want this to be harder than it needs to be." Harder than it needs to be. The irony almost made me laugh. She'd already wrecked years of marriage like it was nothing more than a broken piece of furniture she couldn't wait to toss out. "I don't plan to," I said evenly, holding her gaze without so much as a blink. The lawyers started rattling off the terms. She wanted the house, a good chunk of the furniture, and a nice slice of what she thought was my small savings. She probably expected a fight, maybe even thought I'd grovel, or at least push back a little. But I didn't. I agreed to everything, signed every paper without even blinking. And the look Stacy gave me, that confused little frown, was worth every penny. "You're okay with all this?" Stacy asked, her voice laced with suspicion. "Why wouldn't I be?" I said lightly, keeping my tone casual. "It's just stuff, Stacy. You can have it." For just a split second, I caught a flicker of doubt in her eyes, a crack in that smug facade, but she quickly smoothed it over with a practiced smile. She thought she'd won, thought she was walking away with everything that mattered. What she didn't realize was, the joke was on her. The house she was so eager to claim, it was never really mine, just a rental, something I leased years ago when I first started freelancing and needed a separate space to work. And that chunk of savings she thought she was taking a piece of, that was just a tiny slice of my real wealth. The bulk of it, the serious money, was tucked safely away in investments and accounts she had no idea even existed. So, as the final papers were signed and everything was made official, Stacy leaned back in her chair, looking like the cat who caught the canary. "Well, I'm glad we could handle this like adults," she said, in that smug, patronizing way she always had when she thought she was being magnanimous. I just nodded, biting the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. A week later, I packed up the last of my things and walked away from the house she had fought so hard to claim. I left it all behind, the furniture, the decorations, even the expensive kitchen gadgets she never once bothered to learn how to use. Let her have it. It wasn't worth the trouble to take anything with me. Let her decorate her new life with the scraps. William, of course, wasted no time moving in. A neighbor sent me a photo not long after, William lugging boxes up the front steps, Stacy beaming at him from the porch like a proud little homemaker. They must have thought they were building their dream life together, completely oblivious to the storm brewing just outside their pretty little bubble. What Stacy didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that I'd been collecting receipts for months. Photos, texts, even GPS records showing their not-so-innocent lunches at a nearby hotel. I could have blown the whole thing wide open during the divorce, made a public spectacle out of it. But I didn't. Why? Because that would have dragged out the drama. And honestly, I had something much more satisfying in mind. I wanted karma to do the heavy lifting. And I wanted a front row seat when it did. Over the next few weeks, while they played house and paraded their relationship around town like it was something to be proud of, I kept my head down and focused on building my new life. My career took off in ways I hadn't even imagined, new projects, new partnerships, a bigger paycheck. Meanwhile, Stacy and William stayed busy showing off their perfect life. I didn't text. I didn't call. I didn't react. And I knew, that silence would eat away at them more than any angry words ever could. One afternoon, I got a text from a mutual friend. "Neil, did you hear? Stacy's throwing a housewarming party. She and William are really putting on a show." I couldn't help but chuckle to myself. Of course they were. Stacy had always needed an audience. She lived for validation, for the appearance of success, even if the reality was crumbling underneath. She didn't realize that her shiny new life was already built on quicksand. That evening, sitting in my new apartment with a view that stretched across the city skyline, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: peace. Stacy thought she'd won, but she didn't have a clue what she had really lost. And William? Well, he was about to find out the hard way that stealing someone else's life comes with a price tag. I wasn't in a hurry. Revenge, after all, is a dish best served ice cold. And I was just getting started. Honestly, I don't know what Stacy was thinking when she and William made their little affair official. Maybe she pictured this perfect new life, brunch dates, romantic getaways, that honeymoon glow. If that's what she imagined, reality hit her like a freight train. The cracks didn't take long to show. And I didn't have to lift a finger. The first hints came from whispers passed around by old friends. "She's hosting all these dinner parties to show off," one buddy told me, half laughing. "But William's been blowing through cash, and I hear they're already falling behind on bills." Of course they were. William had always been that guy, loved living large, hated actually putting in the work to afford it. He liked flashy cars, designer clothes, fancy dinners. But responsibility, financial discipline, not exactly his strengths. Stacy, bless her heart, had no idea she traded real stability for a guy who was all glitter and no gold. Then came the gossip about the fighting. Turns out, they weren't exactly the lovebirds they pretended to be. People started whispering about the arguments, loud enough to hear through the walls of their rented house. Yes, rented. The house Stacy had been so proud of winning wasn't even hers anymore. She'd been forced to sell it after realizing she couldn't handle the upkeep on her own. One day, I got a call from an old neighbor who could barely contain her laughter. "Neil, you're not gonna believe this," she said. "The landlord was banging on Stacy and William's door this morning. They're behind on rent." I leaned back in my chair, letting a slow smile spread across my face. "How far behind?" I asked, savoring every word. 3 months, she said, still laughing. "They're trying to play it off like it's no big deal, but you can tell they're drowning." It was poetic. The empire they built on betrayal was crumbling faster than they could scramble to patch it up. Meanwhile, I stayed focused on what mattered. My career kept growing. Opportunities kept rolling in. I poured my energy into building something real, something lasting. While they stumbled around in the ruins of their choices, I was out there creating a future worth being proud of. Then, out of nowhere, Stacy reached out. She sent me a text one evening, pretending it was just a casual check-in. "Hi, Neil. I hope you're doing well. Just wanted to see how things are going for you." I stared at the message for a long minute, debating whether it was even worth a response. It was obvious, she wasn't really checking in, she was fishing. Still, I figured I'd play along. "Things are great, Stacy," I typed back. "Business is booming. How about you?" Her reply came almost immediately. "Oh, you know, William and I are doing well. Things are a little tight financially, but we're managing." I almost laughed out loud. Managing, now that was generous. But the real kicker came a week later. I was walking out of a meeting with a big client when I spotted her waiting outside the building. Stacy. And man, she looked different. Gone was the polished, confident woman I used to know. Standing there, she looked worn down, tired, stressed, a shadow of who she used to be. "Neil," she called out, her voice shaky with something I hadn't heard from her in years: uncertainty. I walked toward her, keeping my face neutral. "Stacy," I said smoothly, "what brings you here?" She fumbled with the strap of her purse, clearly nervous. I just wanted to talk," she said, her voice soft. "Things have been tough lately and I thought maybe we could catch up." Catch up. I knew exactly what she wanted, but I wasn't about to make this easy for her. "I'm a little busy," I said, glancing at my watch. "But I hope things turn around for you." She forced a smile, but I could see the cracks beneath it, the desperation she was trying so hard to hide. As I walked away, a wave of satisfaction washed over me. This was karma, pure and simple. Stacy and William had gambled everything on a lie, thinking they'd traded up. But what they didn't realize was, there's always a cost. Now, they were stuck living a life they couldn't afford, trapped in a crumbling fantasy while the walls closed in around them. And the best part? I hadn't had to lift a single finger. They'd done it to themselves. Their picture-perfect world was falling apart, and I hadn't even started my revenge yet. The thing about revenge is, it doesn't always have to be loud. Sometimes the sweetest victories come quietly, slipping in without fanfare. You just sit back and let the truth do the talking. Let the consequences roll in, slow and heavy. That's exactly what I was doing. While Stacy and William scrambled to hold up the illusion of their perfect life, I was thriving. My business had exploded in ways I never imagined. Deals closed left and right, opportunities piled up, and before long, I was pulling in over $544,000 a year. I wasn't just doing well, I was flourishing. But I didn't brag about it, didn't post about it. I stayed quiet, under the radar. Stacy had already convinced herself I was a man who didn't work, who couldn't provide, and I had no reason to correct her. Her ignorance worked just fine for me. Instead, I poured all that energy inward. I upgraded my apartment, moved into a sleek, modern place downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows, smart home tech, a killer view of the city skyline. It wasn't just a place to live. It was a symbol. A fresh start, built entirely by me, free from the bitterness and betrayal that stained the last chapter of my life. My days were packed, meetings, projects, creative work that pushed me to new heights. And my nights? Those were for me. I reconnected with old friends, made new ones, went out more, laughed more. Life felt lighter, freer, full of possibility. Of course, Stacy still popped up every now and then. I'd hear from mutual friends about the latest disaster, unpaid bills, public arguments, mounting debt. Apparently, they had tried hosting a fancy dinner party at their rental, only for the power to get cut halfway through the night because they hadn't paid the utility bill. Neil, a buddy, laughed over the phone, "You should have seen it." Stacy was mortified. William tried to play it off like it was some mix-up, but everyone knew exactly what was going on. I didn't laugh. I just listened, nodding slowly, letting the satisfaction settle in my chest. This wasn't about gloating. This was about balance. They had thrown my loyalty, my love, in the trash, and now life was simply returning the favor. One afternoon, I ran into William at a coffee shop. I spotted him before he noticed me, sitting hunched over a cheap laptop, scrolling through what looked like job postings. He looked rough. Gone was the polished, cocky guy I used to call a friend. In his place was a worn-down version of William, tired, anxious, clinging to whatever scraps he could find. When he finally glanced up and saw me, there was no smugness in his expression, only embarrassment. "Neil," he said awkwardly, standing up like he wasn't sure if he should offer a handshake or just run. "William," I said calmly, giving him a small nod. "How's it going?" He shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting around the room like he was searching for an escape. "Good," he said, forcing a chuckle. "You know, just busy with work and all that." I raised an eyebrow. "Work, huh? That's good to hear." He let out a weak, nervous laugh that didn't even come close to reaching his eyes. "Yeah, keeping busy, you know how it is." I just nodded, letting the silence stretch between us, heavy and deliberate. Let him squirm. Let him feel it. He had earned every second of it. William shifted awkwardly, mumbling something about needing to get back to his tasks before practically bolting for the door. That one encounter told me everything I needed to know. William was struggling. And Stacy's perfect new life? Yeah, it wasn't so perfect after all. As the weeks rolled by, the messages from Stacy started coming in more often. At first, they were vague, little check-ins, polite how are yous, but I could read between the lines. She wasn't just reaching out to be friendly. She was testing the waters, trying to see if I'd be willing to throw her a lifeline. I ignored most of them. The few I did answer. Short, polite, giving her nothing she could grab onto. It wasn't long before she dropped the act. "Neil, I know we've had our differences, but I could really use a friend right now." A friend. The irony almost made me laugh out loud. She'd tossed me aside without a second thought. Now, with her shiny new world collapsing around her, she wanted me to be her safety net? Yeah, no thanks. I didn't respond. Not because I was trying to be spiteful, but because I didn't owe her a damn thing. Stacy had made her choices. Now she could live with them. My silence said more than any words ever could. While she and William fought to stay afloat, I was out here soaring. Opportunities kept knocking. My investments were thriving. And my life was full of peace, purpose, and forward momentum. I didn't need to call them out. I didn't need to argue or demand apologies. My success was the loudest, clearest statement I could make. And the best part, they knew it. They saw it, in every unanswered text, every rumor they heard about how well I was doing, every time they caught a glimpse of me moving through life with my head held high while they scrambled. This wasn't just about getting even. It was about proving to myself that I could rise above it all. And I had. Quietly, confidently, completely. Their downfall wasn't a dramatic explosion, it was a slow, miserable collapse they couldn't stop even if they tried. I watched it from a distance, catching updates through friends, occasional glimpses on social media. Every update painted a clearer picture. They were drowning in their own arrogance, and the water was rising fast. At first, Stacy kept trying to keep up appearances. She'd post pictures of fancy dinners, smiling selfies, the occasional dream vacation, except the trips got fewer and farther between, and the smiles and the photos started looking more and more forced. Then the whispers started. People noticed Stacy wasn't quite the polished, perfect version of herself anymore. Her designer clothes were replaced with cheaper knockoffs. Her once flawless hair and makeup now looked rushed, tired. William, too, the guy who used to flaunt new clothes every week, was now recycling old outfits. It didn't take long before the gossip turned into outright updates. One afternoon, a mutual friend called me, barely able to contain her laughter. "Neil, you're gonna love this," she said. "Stacy and William are in deep trouble. They're months behind on rent." I raised an eyebrow, not shocked, but definitely entertained. "Rent?" I asked. "I thought they owned that place." My friend laughed harder. "Not even close. They've been renting it this whole time. And word is, they're about to get evicted." I leaned back in my chair, letting out a small chuckle. It was perfect, really. Stacy had fought so hard to keep that house, to claim it as her prize, and now, she couldn't even afford to stay in it. And the hits just kept coming. Another friend mentioned that William had been laid off. He was still trying to act like he had everything under control, but it was obvious, he was scrambling. And Stacy, for all her talk about wanting a man who worked and contributed, she had never held a real job herself. Now they were staring down mounting bills, no savings, and no plan. Their little dream life was crumbling fast. One evening, as I sat sipping my coffee and scrolling through emails, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was Stacy. "Neil, I really need to talk to you. It's important." I stared at the screen for a minute before deciding to respond. "Is everything okay?" I typed back, keeping it simple. Her reply came almost instantly. "Not really. William and I are going through a rough patch. I was wondering if you could help. Maybe just a small loan to get us through." I couldn't help it. I laughed out loud. A loan, from me. The man she once dismissed as a failure. The man she betrayed, humiliated, and replaced. And now she was asking for my help. "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied, "but I'm afraid I can't help. I'm sure you'll figure it out." Her next message came slower, almost hesitant. "Neil, please. Just this once. You don't have to make it a big deal." I didn't even bother answering. There was nothing left to say. She had made her bed. Now it was time for her and William to lie in it. A week later, the final blow landed. Stacy and William had officially been evicted. Their landlord had apparently had enough of their excuses and gave them a hard deadline to pack up and leave. They couldn't meet it. They had nowhere else to go. They ended up moving into a tiny, run-down apartment way out on the edge of town. "Neil, I wish you could see it," the same mutual friend told me over the phone, barely able to stop laughing. "It's such a dump. Total night and day from the life they were pretending to have. Stacy's barely keeping it together, and William looks like he's aged 10 years. I just smiled to myself, sipping my coffee as the city lights twinkled outside my window. Poetic justice, plain and simple. They built their empire on lies and betrayal. And now, they were living in the wreckage. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Their downfall wasn't about me. It was about the consequences of their own decisions finally catching up to them. Stacy had traded a life of stability and loyalty for a fantasy that couldn't even survive reality. And William, well, he was reaping exactly what he had sown. But the real sign, the moment that said it all, came during one of those random, unexpected encounters. I was grabbing a few things at the grocery store when I spotted her. Stacy, pushing a cart filled with store-brand essentials, looking like a shell of the woman I used to know. She looked up, met my eyes, and froze. "Neil," she said, her voice small and shaky. "Stacy," I said back, keeping my tone cool, neutral. She opened her mouth, like she wanted to say something, but nothing came out. She just stood there, awkward and defeated. Gone was the confident, smug woman who once demanded a divorce and proudly flaunted her affair. In her place was someone smaller, someone broken. "I hope you're doing well," I said, breaking the silence. She nodded quickly, avoiding my eyes. "You too," she mumbled before wheeling her cart down the aisle, her shoulders slumped. I watched her walk away and, for a second, I felt a strange mix of emotions, a little satisfaction, sure, but mostly pity. Stacy had made her choices. And those choices had led her right here. This was the life she had fought so hard to create, and now she was trapped in it. I didn't need to say anything more. I didn't need to rub it in. Life had already handled it for me. As I walked out of the store that day, it hit me, sometimes karma doesn't need a push. It just needs a little time. It wasn't long before everything came crashing down. I knew it was coming, it was inevitable. People like Stacy and William don't know how to handle consequences. When their perfect little illusion starts crumbling, they scramble for someone else to blame, or to save them. One morning, while finishing up a call with a client, my phone lit up. An unsaved number. But I knew exactly who it was. Stacy. For a moment, I thought about ignoring it. But curiosity got the better of me. I answered, keeping my voice calm. Neil speaking. There was a pause, and then her voice, tight and strained, like she was holding back tears. Neil, we need to talk. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. About what, Stacy? Another pause. I could practically hear her scrambling to find the right words. About everything. About William. About us. Us. I almost laughed. Stacy, I said, voice flat. There is no us. That ended the day you handed me those divorce papers. What's this really about? There was a beat of silence before she finally spoke. We're struggling, Neil. Things haven't been easy. Since everything happened. I just thought maybe we could talk. Maybe you could help. There it was. The real reason for the call. Help with what? I asked, pretending not to understand. Financially, she admitted, her voice dropping to a whisper. Just a loan. Something small. To help us get back on our feet. I couldn't hold back the laugh that bubbled out of me. Stacy, I said, my voice cutting through the tension. You left me because you thought I wasn't good enough. That I didn't work hard enough. Didn't make enough money for you. And now. I shook my head. Now you want me to clean up the mess you made. Her tone sharpened instantly, slipping back into that familiar defensiveness. You don't understand. William and I just hit a rough patch. A rough patch? I cut her off, my voice hard. Stacy, you chose this. You left me for William because you thought he was the better option. Now you want me to come in and fix it. She started to protest, but I wasn't having it. You wanted freedom, Stacy. You got it. Enjoy it. Before she could say another word, I ended the call. The next encounter wasn't over the phone. It was in person. And it was even more pathetic. A week later, Stacy showed up at my office, unannounced, shoving past my assistant like she owned the place. She looked frazzled, desperate. A far cry from the polished woman who once thought she was too good for me. Neil, she said, her voice pleading. We need to talk. I leaned back in my chair, arms folded across my chest. You've got 2 minutes, I said. Make it count. She launched into a whole sob story. How tough things had been, how unfair life was being, how they just needed a little help to get back on track. I let her ramble for a minute before cutting her off. Stacy, I said, voice steady. You made your decisions. You left me for William because you thought you were upgrading. I leaned in, letting the words sink in. So tell me, how's that working out for you? Her face flushed with a mixture of anger and shame. Neil, I know I hurt you. But you don't have to be so cruel. I thought you were better than this. I laughed, shaking my head. Better than this? I repeated. You thought I was a failure, Stacy. You thought I wasn't enough. And now, here you are, begging for scraps. I owe you nothing. Just then, the universe decided to send in a cherry on top. William walked through the door. He must have followed her, because the timing was too perfect to be accidental. He looked terrible, stressed, disheveled, a shadow of the smug guy who once betrayed me. Neil, he said, trying to sound casual. But his voice cracked. Can we talk? Man to man. I stood up, walked around my desk, and faced him. Man to man. I echoed. You mean the same way you talked to me while sleeping with my wife behind my back? Save it, William. He winced but tried to push on. Look, we made mistakes. But we're in a tough spot. We thought maybe you could help. Just a loan. Something small. I shook my head, laughing again. Unbelievable. You two betrayed me. Lied to me. And now you think I'm going to bail you out. I stepped closer, my voice low and firm. I don't owe you anything, William. Not a damn thing. William's face turned red, his fists clenching uselessly at his sides. You don't have to be a jerk about it, he muttered. I didn't flinch. I didn't even raise my voice. You made your bed, I said. Now lie in it. Stacy reached out one last time, her voice trembling. Please, Neil. We're desperate. I turned to her, looking her dead in the eyes. Desperation doesn't erase betrayal, Stacy. You made your choices. Now you're living with them. This conversation is over. I walked to the door, opened it, and stood aside, waiting. They stood there for a moment, stunned, like they couldn't believe it was really over. But it was. It had been over for a long time. Finally, they shuffled out, their heads hanging low, and I closed the door behind them. As the latch clicked shut, a deep sense of closure settled over me. They had thought they could manipulate me, guilt me, play on some old version of myself. But that man, the one they betrayed, was long gone. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about standing tall,